Welcome everyone, and thank you for your interest in Perceptive Software and for attending our webinar today. My name is Jeff Heegert, and I am the Solutions Manager for our financial services and insurance at Perceptive Software, and I will be your host for today's webinar on mining data to optimize insurance processes. The concept of data mining and analytics is gaining a lot of steam in the industry, and there were actually several sessions dedicated to the topic at the recent Accord Loma and IASA Industry Conference. Here at Perceptive Software, we recognize the need for stronger analytical tools, and we're pretty excited about what we have to offer our current and prospective customers. Also joining me from Perceptive Software are Danny Cates and Ron Hofstetter. Danny is the product manager for our data and process mining tool called Perceptive Reflect, and Ron Hofstetter is one of our top-notch engineers who will be driving the demo a little bit later in today. Together we're going to discuss some of the challenges facing the insurance industry today and provide you with an introduction to data and process mining, as well as give you a demonstration of our Perceptive Reflect product and how it can be used to mine your business data and help optimize your insurance processes. Again, we appreciate your interest in Perceptive Software and for attending the webinar today. Let's take a quick look at the agenda, and then we'll go ahead and get started. The webinar was open to a wide variety of attendees, including current and prospective customers. So I'll start by providing a high-level overview of Perceptive Software. For those of you not familiar with us, it will give you a background on our company and where we fit in the insurance industry. Following that, we'll take a few minutes to talk through some of the challenges in the insurance industry that we feel are driving organizations toward data and process mining solutions. I personally have spent 15+ years working in and implementing workflow solutions in the insurance industry, and I've lived some of these challenges firsthand. I'll then turn it over to Danny Cates, who, as well as our Perceptive Reflect product. And finally, Ron Hofstetter will take you through a demonstration of our product, and we'll wrap up with a few summary points, and then we'll open it up to some questions. Keep in mind that you can submit questions throughout the webinar at any time. We'll hold them and address as many of them as we can at the end of the webinar. And also, we're going to stop a few places along the way for some polls so that we better understand the audience and the participants. In fact, I think we have one of those coming up next on your role in the organizations. Okay, so the quick poll on your screen there, what is your role in your organization with regard to processes? And we have 4 options there that you can select from. So if you could go ahead and select your role within your organization, we will capture that information, and we appreciate your participation. Okay, so it looks like we have other is the most of the categories that came in. So we have 25% showing that they are from the information systems or IT support. Hoping to get a little bit more of the business owner or process owners involved, but maybe on some of the future sessions that we have. So thank you for that participation. We'll go ahead and move forward with the presentation. Before I dive into the corporate overview, I think I'll give you a sneak preview of what you are about to see from Danny and Ron, and this will help you put some context around what we present so you can begin thinking about the needs of your own organization. Danny and Ron will provide more details in a few minutes, but Perceptive Reflect is a tool that uses actual data from your business systems to generate a graphical visual representation of your business process so that you can see how each unit of work goes through that process. What you see on the slide is a mock-up of the end result showing a series of queues or the boxes or workflow steps for a given process and the possible routing steps between those steps. And at this point, without the movements of the shapes or the visualization, it looks like something you can create in Microsoft Visio or other diagramming software. But keep in mind, Perceptive Reflect doesn't, you don't build this diagram in the software. The software builds it for you based on your historical data. So there's no more interviewing your associates or capturing your data and then trying to keep up with your Visio diagrams and keeping them in order. And so how the shapes flow through the diagram or don't flow gives you a visual representation of where to focus your process improvement efforts. And I think this is pretty cool stuff, but it's not anything like what you're going to see in an actual demonstration of the product. So let's go over an overview of Perceptive Software for those of you who are not familiar with our company. This is a quick one-slide. And our offices are located in Shawnee, Kansas, which is a suburb of Kansas City. Shawnee is considered our headquarters, but we have regional offices all over the world, including the locations listed in the bullet point. Since our inception, our focus has been on process and content management software. This includes our flagship product, ImageNow, as well as business process management or BPM solutions, enterprise content management, document output management solutions, and business intelligence, as well as many other products and solutions. Across all of our industries, we have customers in over 30 countries worldwide. In June of 2010, Perceptive Software was acquired by Lexmark International. Most of you are probably familiar with Lexmark. They are a global technology company that provides businesses of all sizes with a broad range of printing and imaging products, and Perceptive Software operates as the standalone software division within Lexmark. Since 1995, we've grown to be one of the 10 largest content management providers in the world with roughly 1,300 employees worldwide, and about half of those located in our Shawnee, Kansas headquarters. So that's enough about us. Why are we so gung-ho about data and process mining in the insurance industry? As I mentioned before, data mining and analytics were a hot topic at this year's Accord Loma and IASA conferences. We could probably do an entire webinar on the challenges facing the industry, but I boil it down to the one that I feel is sort of the granddaddy of them all, which is maintaining profitability in a volatile marketplace. Now keep in mind that volatile doesn't necessarily mean bad, it just means there's a lot of fluctuation. It's actually a very exciting time to be in the insurance industry and the software industry. There's a lot of opportunity, but with that opportunity comes challenges and hurdles that need to be addressed. And I've listed some of those here. The first one, unfortunately, is something that insurance companies or carriers don't have much control over, and that's the market. Many insurance carriers rely on interest returns or investment returns in order to offset operating costs, and with the low interest rates, while they are good for consumers, can spell problems for insurance companies, especially when those companies are already running lean on resources, both human resources and IT budgets. Another factor sort of influencing the market is the ever-changing and increasing regulations and compliance standards that, again, put more importance and stress on your operational efficiency. Traditionally, insurance has been managed by state regulations, but the government is starting to get more involved, especially in healthcare. And as those regulations and compliance standards begin to increase, it's causing carriers to have to find more efficient ways to do their processes, and oftentimes some of those compliance standards conflict with one another, causing a carrier or an organization to have multiple variations of a process in order to satisfy the needs of one state versus another state, or one type of product versus another type of product. And the third one on the list is dealing with our consumers. Insurance consumers are getting smarter and have way more information available to them than ever before. The days of contacting and dealing with an independent agent who might share information on 4 or 5 product offerings, the insurance consumer today can find information on hundreds of companies that offer products at a wide range of pricing. And companies have to figure out how to efficiently bring in mobile strategies, self-service strategies, and social media into their business processes. That all kind of leads to the final bullet point on this slide about the ever-growing competition to attract new customers. As we talked about before, the consumers are much more smarter. They have more information available to them. It's easier for them to search for a replacement product, and so retaining the customers that you have relies the most efficient customer-facing processes that you can have to ensure that your consumers stay with your product and with your organization. All of these discussions regarding profitability in the marketplace really lead back to making sure that you have processes that are as efficient as possible. Insurance is not any different than any business that produces a product or a service. If you've already reduced the cost or the price of that product or service as low as you can, the only way you can maintain a profit is by increasing your operational efficiency. And I think that's what insurance carriers are looking at now. They're at the place where they feel they've lowered the price of their products about as much as they can, and are looking for other ways to streamline their business processes and become more efficient. Again, I said we could probably do a whole webinar on some of these challenges, but I want to get into the data mining and the process mining of the webinar that we signed up for. So just keep in mind these particular issues that I addressed, and maybe there's some unique ones that are your organization, that are applying to your organization. I'm going to turn it over to Danny Cates now, and he's going to walk you through an overview of data and process mining as well as our Perceptive Reflect product. Danny?
Thanks, Jeff. So as Jeff mentioned, I'm the product manager for our process mining product, Perceptive Reflect. So first of all, just in a nutshell, what is process mining? And so as you can read here, analyzing your business processes based on actual data from your application. And so that analysis can come in the form of generating a process model. It's going to be showing some performance metrics. It's going to be the ability to do some really unique visualization that we're going to get to that kind of Jeff showed you a sneak preview before, but as he mentioned, the actual product is a lot cooler looking than that. So, but in those business processes, as you know, there's a wide variety of business processes that you guys use, and those application could be your claims management system or underwriting or admin, or in this visual here we have ImageNow, or ECM repository, or it could be an ERP system or a CRM system or whatever. The fact is, most all applications are recording event data in some form or another, and basically we're extracting that data and doing our video on it and producing some nice visual tools for analysis. So that's, in a nutshell, what it is we're talking about. So before I get too much further into it, I want to just throw out another poll question here for you. And the question is, how familiar are you with process mining in analysis? So before we tell you what it is, just want to see your background on it. Okay, so we got a mostly not familiar and a little bit of familiarity, and some very familiar, at least one very familiar. So good to know. Appreciate you taking the time to do that. And so now I would like to help educate you a little further on process mining. So before I get too far in, once again, it helps to kind of understand where we're going with this. So I would like to just mention the benefits. What are we trying to get out of this? What are we trying to achieve? So the first one, obtain an accurate, objective assessment of the process flow. This is, you'll probably hear this reiterated several times between Ron and I, that it's an accurate, objective assessment. By that we mean just exactly what it says, not subjective to people's opinions. So Jeff mentioned the interview process. So traditional process discovery would be conducted by interviews in the past, where you ask somebody what they do and what work they do, and they hand it off to this person, that person gives it to that person. And that is limited and very labor intensive, and also subjective to whatever they answer. So this is going to be very objective, because it's going to be just the facts straight from the data. We're also going to be able to identify resource wasting, breakdowns, and bottlenecks. And we're going to do this through some really unique and compelling visualization techniques that you'll see later. So it's going to be able to do things that traditional reporting is far from being able to show you, but in the way that it visualizes the dispersion of the work and the flow, and over time it'll bring to light some issues that you may not have realized were quite so prevalent. We're also going to be able to support compliance by identifying exceptions. So identifying exceptions can come both with visualization, so you could see routes and paths that you weren't even aware existed in your process, or it could be through the performance metrics and other ways. If you had key performance indicator or some compliance as part of a service level agreement, or whatever the case may be. There's going to be means to measure whether you're complying with those or not. And then finally, along the line of the performance metrics, we're going to be able to measure continuous process improvement efforts. And then we're going to be able to slice and dice that by personnel, department, date ranges, any other definable subset within the data. You're going to be able to analyze that. So not only can you use it to discover your process, but you can continue to use it to analyze and see how things are going if you do implement change, because nobody lives in a vacuum, so there's going to continue to be changes in different factors affecting the process. So how does it work? That's what those are the benefits we're trying to get at, but how does it really work? What are we really doing? So this graphic just kind of illustrates that you have several applications that you use, like I mentioned before. So it could be an admin system or underwriting or wherever. It could be our ImageNow repository. But the fact is that there's going to be digital traces or data being written somewhere, event data, from these applications. And so this could be in a file somewhere on the server, or this could be stored in a database like it's kind of depicted here. But keep in mind, this does not have to be a formalized workflow process. It's not like I have to set up the workflow in my system and then I just get that data. This could be a very informal, maybe there's an activity that only happens every couple of weeks, and the trigger is that somebody from the next cubicle over sends you an email, and then you perform an action. It doesn't, it's not necessarily standardized workflow. It could be very informal process, as long as there's activities that are occurring, which there of course normally are, by people, that is going to have an event data stored somewhere. If we can get at that data, then we can put it all together, regardless of where it came from, and then assemble a process diagram from that. So the next graphic here shows you what we're going to do with that data. So in this first case, we'll call it, we have in this little purple person. It doesn't necessarily need to represent a person. This could be, think of it, it could be a file or a case, or however you want to visualize that. It starts with step A. So step A could be, a claim submitted or something like that. And then it goes to step D, and then to step F. That's the first case. The next one, we have this green case here. It goes from A to B to C to F. So a few different steps there and a different path to get there. And then finally, we have a third, just to drive home the point, with a completely different sequence. So the different paths or steps in the process could be, it went through, one was accepted, one was rejected, one went through additional review, etc. You get the point. So what we're going to do is, once we aggregate all that event data of these different steps, we're going to combine it and generate this combined process model or diagram. And so as Ron will show you in the demo, this could be as inclusive of everything in the data set or as you want. So there's different levels. There's going to be ways to control that, how inclusive you are. So you can see kind of the happy path, or you could see all the most exotic exceptions that rarely ever occur, because those are eating up a lot of time when they do occur. Then you can also see not only the process model, but you could also potentially see a social network, so you can see how the users are interacting with each other, not just a top-down process model, but you could see more of an interactive between users or groups of users. So we get the data, we generate this, but what is needed in the data? So the three requirements of the data are, first of all, that it has a case ID. So there's going to be an identifying number or name or something that's tracking this case as it goes through the process. Secondly, you need an activity, something that describes the activity being done. So in this case, it could be application receipt, application submitted, requirements underwriting, withdrawn, etc. So you need some sort of activity, approved, denied, that sort of thing. And the third requirement is a timestamp. And so with those three simple requirements, case ID, activity, and a timestamp, we're able to then put together, we're able to mine the process. And so without any prior information of what the process looks like, just based on the timestamps, it can go through an algorithm and see what order they're in and follow the case based on its ID, and then put together what activities were performed in what order. And then you combine that for all the different cases in the data set, and you can begin to make this combined process model. In addition to the three required fields, the case ID, activity, and timestamp, you can have additional metadata. So one that you'd almost always have is the employee or the user that executed the activity. So that's going to be able to allow you to see that social diagram and see who was interacting with each other and what people routed work to what other people. And then you can also put in additional case or activity level metadata. So this example here, case type, would be a perfect example of something that would be meaningful once you got the data into the tool and you wanted to differentiate between what the process looked like just for the mortgage protection type cases, or for the whole life type cases, or for traditional life type cases. And so additional metadata fields can be added into the data. But again, the three requirements are just case ID, activity, and timestamp. So any event data that you can get that has this information will be eligible to be imported into a process mining tool. And so in our case, we have workflow history data in our ImageNow repository. So we have a really quick and easy method of integrating with Reflect. And so we actually kind of just use that as a value add to our ImageNow customers, if you're familiar, if there are any on the call. And so we offer a Reflect standard functionality where it just works with all the ImageNow data. But what's kind of more important to this webinar is the Reflect Enterprise, so being able to mine data from all kinds of source systems. So the software really ultimately is agnostic to where the data came from. So like I said, whether it's claims management or admin or underwriting, et cetera. As long as we can get the data, with Reflect Enterprise we can mine it. And then the real pinnacle would be to actually mine end-to-end process across multiple systems. So not just the claims management system, but if the process flowed from claims management over to admin, to multiple systems, we could potentially, as long as we married the data by a unique identifier, a case ID, we could then visually represent that and show it in Reflect spanning across multiple systems, so you can see a holistic picture of the process in your environment. And so what does a process improvement project, typical project, look like? So that's what we're really kind of talking about here, is improving these processes. Well, first of all, you'd select a process. So you probably want to pick something that's high value, that not something that there wouldn't be any returns on improving it. You'd want to discuss pain points, because most likely you're already aware of something in that process that's less than optimal. So it's always good to, before you start, kind of figure out what you acknowledge or recognize as the pain points to help you focus on what you're trying to do. And then you can discuss some goals and success criteria of how you're going to get some value returned on this process improvement project. And this is generic, whether you're using process mining or not. This is kind of a universal truth of a process improvement project. But when we get to points 4 and 5, when we extract the data and analyze the process, here's where you'll see a drastic difference between process mining and traditional methods. It's not nearly as labor intensive, and there's going to be, again, that objective information that's not subjective when you get into the analysis phase to people's opinions or subjective measurements. So that's where you'll really see the value of a process mining tool. And then So once you go through the extraction of data and analysis of the process, then if it's really decided that you want to improve this process, you'll build a business case and present results and go through a kind of iterative process like that. So in our case, with Perceptive Reflect in our process mining tool, probably any process mining tool for that matter, you'd normally involve a process owner expert and an IT specialist, especially up front. So first of all, you're going to have to be able to get to that data. And so that'll take a database administrator or somebody familiar with getting the actual raw data. But you also certainly want to have the process owner involved, especially as you go forward, because as you analyze the process, they're going to be the ones that really are able to determine what it's telling you and what these visualizations mean. And then finally, we found that as we take Perceptive Reflect Enterprise to market, we think we find the best results are usually achieved by starting with a kind of a proof of concept phase, so kind of limited in scope, and you start with a week or two and define some objectives and just prove it at a small level and show the stakeholders the power of it and what it can do. And then from there you move on to the larger project. So of course, if you're interested in that, I'm sure you know how to get a hold of us. So without further ado, I think we'll jump to my final polling question, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ron. So after I kind of told you about process mining, I would like to know if your organization were to engage in this sort of process improvement project, what process do you think you would target first? With that, I'll turn it over to Ron Hofstetter.
Great. So from the poll, we see claims and policy admin seem to be the most common target areas for data mining, which makes sense. So moving on, just a couple of slides left before we dive into the actual software. I wanted to talk a little bit about the data gathering process that happens. Specifically, we'll talk about ImageNow, but keep in mind, as Danny said earlier, that just about any system of record is going to generate this sort of log data that we can use to do the process mining. In this case, we're looking at the Workflow Designer tool that's a part of the ImageNow system, and this is a real simplified workflow process for what you might see in an underwriting process. And basically, the various blue boxes that you see on the screen represent a step of the process. And so typically, this will be used to set up what, for example, what a document flow might be for an underwriting process. So the application would come in, it gets forwarded to a step where requirements, the requirement step happens, and then it goes through underwriting, where it might go to op risk or to decision, et cetera. So this is all mapped out in ImageNow using the Workflow Designer. And then as the process gets put in place and users begin using it, we can capture all of the data that represents the activity that's happening as this process proceeds. So for example, within ImageNow, you might be working in your system. You can retrieve any document that's related to a record that you're viewing in your system with a single click of a button. In this case, we're retrieving an insurance application. The person would do their step of the process, so whatever that happens to be for that particular workflow, so they perform that action. They can then route that workflow item off to the next step of the process. And in this case, maybe ImageNow gives them a selection of what steps this item should go to next. In this case, either decision or off risk. So they can route that item forward. And a result of this is that ImageNow is capturing all of the information about what is happening to that item as it moves through the workflow process. So what you see here on the screen is the workflow history of a particular item. You can see what queues it has gone through, what has happened to it within those workflow queues, who worked on it, etc. This is the kind of data that we are using to then pull into a tool, the Reflect tool, to do the process mining so that we can get a better understanding of what is actually happening to these items as they move through the process. So with that, I will flip over to the Reflect tool. Perceptive Reflect is a web-based tool, and I've pulled up Perceptive Reflect here, and I'll start with kind of a summary of the data that we're going to be looking at as we go through our process mining. On this first tab on the summary, you see some statistics about the data that we've captured. In this case, we have 13 activities. So if you could think of an activity as a step of the process, or in our workflow diagram that we just saw on the previous slide, each one of those blue boxes. We have about 1,200 cases or 1,200 items that are moving through our process, which generates a total of about 7,600 events. So each case, as it moves through a step of the process, generates an event, and that's what we're going to use to generate our process flow diagram. Keep in mind, this is actually a fairly small sample of data. We could see, typically we'll see this running up to millions of events to get a good understanding of what's happening with our workflow process. If I flip over to the next tab, the Attributes and Metrics tab, this just shows the data that we've captured. As Danny said, there are 3 required items: the activity, the case ID, the timestamp, and the activity. But you can also bring in other data as well. So if you want to do process mining to determine, who was the employee who worked on this item, what is the interaction of our employees, how are they handing work off between one another. So the employee is another item that you could pull in as well. So any additional data that you might want to use in your process. Perceptive Reflect works with ImageNow workflow history like we just saw. There's also a Perceptive Reflect Enterprise, which can pull in data from any system and generate the same type of process mining. So with that, I'll go ahead and click on the Mine button over here on the left. And if I click if I go ahead and do a mine on our data, the first diagram that you're going to see is kind of large and unwieldy. This represents the entire process with all of the steps. And if I zoom in a little bit, you can see some of the various steps that we had within our workflow: the receipt of the application, submitting the application, the underwriting step, etc. Now, this has a lot of lines going from these various steps. What this represents is 100% of the data, so all of the cases and what paths they took, including all of the exceptions. This is the real-world view of what happened with every case that went through the system. Over here on the right, we have a slider bar that allows us to adjust the data that we're looking at. And basically what Reflect does is it puts the most common cases or the most common paths earlier in the data set. So if I slide my bar down, if I go somewhere around 50%, it's going to regenerate the process diagram for me, and it's going to be a much more straightforward view of that process. And this is what you might consider, some people call this the happy path. If you were to do interviews, this is what the folks would probably say is the process. So this is what we think actually happens. Whereas when we're looking at 100% of the data, we see that there's also various other exceptions, other paths that the cases can take. So again, zooming in on these boxes, I can see that the various steps, we go from application receipt to submit down to a requirement step. We have a few cases that skip from requirements all the way to decision, some others that go down to an off-risk step down here to the right. So this is our process flow diagram. Within here, I can turn on some statistics, so I can go ahead and show me some performance metrics by checking this box and remine this data. And what Reflect is going to do is actually give me some metrics on each of these. So this will actually show me the number of items that went through each step, and as well as the time that it took to move from one step to another. So just some additional data that gets displayed on the process mine here. In addition to the activity process flow that we can see here, again, based on the data that we brought into this, I can also do a data model based on employee and do what we call a social network. We're not talking about Facebook here, but this will show me a diagram that represents the work that was handed from one employee to another. So instead of looking at it from a step-by-step perspective, we're looking at how is the work being handled between each particular person. And again, the arrows can show that, in this case, a new business associate 3 passed some information off to underwriter 2, etc. So there's all kinds of different views that you can get from the data to give you a better understanding of what's going on within your process. And again, these diagrams are being generated from the actual log data, so this is what really happened based on the history. From this mining screen, I can do other things here. I can filter this, so if I only want to look at certain types of cases, I can filter the data down and do various other ways of slicing and dicing this to get different views of it. The other nice thing that we can do here is we can actually animate the process flow of the items moving through our workflow process. So over here on the left, you see this objects window. These are just basically process models that we've saved off. So in this case, when I go through my mining, I select my slider of the amount of data I want to see. I can then save this as a model, and I can do further analysis on it. Open up that model, do further analysis on it. I'm going to go ahead and select a saved model I have that just basically represents 60% of our data for this particular data process. And I'm going to animate it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select some information on how I want this animated, and I'll click the Generate Animation button. What Reflect is going to do is it's going to go through all of the data, and it's going to generate an animation that shows the actual, gives me a visual representation of the cases moving through this process. And so what you see are various bubbles that are moving from one step to another. And as I'll zoom in on this, we can see it a little better. You can see various colored bubbles moving, in this case from the application submit step down to the requirement step, and then to underwriting, etc. One thing that I can see right away is where I see the bubbles kind of bunching up. That might represent a bottleneck in our process. So this might be an area where we might want to do some investigation and say, okay, it seems to be that the step from requirements to underwriting takes a little longer than maybe we think it should. So that could be an area that we might want to investigate further. You notice the different colors of buttons or of the bubbles that are moving through the process. Over on the right, that tells us what kind of case or what kind of item is moving through our workflow or through our process. So blue represents traditional life, green whole life, etc. We also get some charts here on the average throughput time for those various case types. If I want to dig in a little further, I can kind of pause this animation, and at this point I notice that there's a variable annuity case that's gone off from requirements over to off risk, and maybe I'm curious about that particular case. I can click on that particular bubble, and it will actually give me the case ID of that one case that is taking that path, and then I can take that information and do some further research and say, okay, I don't think that this should have gone to off risk, but let's do some investigation or analysis and find out why that happened and see if there's a problem with our process that we need to fix because of that. You also see an Add Filter button here, so again, I can filter this down by certain cases or certain types of cases if I want to zero in my process just on certain parts of my data. So if I continue the animation, this is just going to continue showing me a nice animation overview of the items as they move through the process. And again, with Perceptive Reflect, in this case, we're looking at cases that have moved through an ImageNow workflow. So this could represent documents that are moving through a document-centric workflow. But as we've said already, that Reflect can pull in any kind of data from any kind of system. So it really doesn't matter, what kind of system that we're looking at. We can generate the same type of process flow diagram and animations based on that data. All right.
All right, thanks, Ron. We'll just do a little wrap-up slide. We talked earlier about how insurance organizations are needing to find ways to be more efficient in their operations in order to maintain profitability. We kind of gave an introduction of the data and process mining and showed the importance of using actual data related to your business process. And then we kind of gave you a demonstration of our product and solution to help you get actionable data to support your process-proven initiative. Some of the points I want to reiterate, here is that, with the impacts to the industry that I mentioned before, a lot of organizations, whether you're an insurance carrier or a producer, or maybe you're a claims processing center, or a broker, the challenge is always trying to make your processes as efficient as possible, and oftentimes you just don't have the data or the information to make good decisions on how to improve those processes. Maybe things are going too slow or things aren't getting routed the correct way. You just don't have enough information to decide what to do about it. And using a data mining tool like Perceptive Reflect gives you that information in an easy manner, and a quick fashion, and a visualization of the process to help you gear your efficiency searches in your process. So with that, I think we'll move on to questions and answers. We've been collecting some questions throughout the webinar. If you have some that you have not submitted, feel free to do that through the webinar. Some of the questions I may answer myself, or I may turn those over to Ron or Danny. So let me take a look through here, and we'll try to address some of those questions.
I see one here, Jeff. Says, can we export the process model from Reflect? It's a great question. We can actually, you can export it as a flash. You can take the data. So as Ron was showing, you can apply filters, and you could generate a data set. You could export that into an Excel file, so if you wanted to do some further analysis. There's several different ways. You can export flash files if you want to see the animation, or a video drawing if you want to export that process model out. Good question.
Yep. I see another one asking whether or not Reflect has to be operated and maintained on-site, or it can be offered as a software as a service. And I think the answer to that is yes.
Yes, it's both on-premise or SaaS.
Okay, we've got time for a few more. This one I think we've already covered. It must have come early in there. Do you have to have ImageNow in order to use Reflect? No, you don't. We have integrated those two products together already, but Reflect can be used against any business application, any data set. So if you already have, if you've got another ECM or a document management or workflow system, you can use Reflect to mine data from that system. Got one come in. Can you keep versions of the diagram so you can compare before, after changes, or quarter to quarter? And I think Ron showed that in the demo, where you can mine data for a particular period. Maybe it's for last quarter. You save that model, and then rerun the same mining against the next quarter's data, and then be able to kind of look at those side by side and compare.
Yeah, we just scratched the surface on all the functionality in there. So one of the things we didn't really have time to get in too much to is also all the different filters and things you can apply. All those can be saved, and you can continue to tweak. So if you get to a certain subset of the data that's really interesting or pertinent or relevant, you can always save that and then pull it back up and then continue to edit it using those same filters and now analyze it, so you can look at one time period versus another. You can overlay them on top of each other, different data sets, so that it could highlight. It'll actually highlight the differences, or you can put them side by side. There's tons of different ways to do that.
Okay, we have another question regarding, is the product available in Spanish or other languages? Since we are a global company, I think the plan is to offer the product in all of the languages that ImageNow is available
That's
in.
right. Right now it's Dutch and English only, but we're just wrapping up our localization efforts for the other 5 languages that ImageNow also supports, which would be French, Italian, German, Portuguese, and Spanish.
Okay, one more. Someone asked, what's the time frame of a process improvement project using data mining software? That was going to be a tough one to answer, although we can tell you that using data mining software would greatly reduce the time frame of that process improvement project. The actual time frame is probably going to depend more on the number of processes you're looking at, the type of process that you're looking at, but actually using the data mining tool to do to replace the interviewing of your associates and the collection of the data and the building out of the models and doing the analytical research on your process is going to be greatly reduced with data mining software. So I think that was all the questions that we had come in so far. If you have further questions that we didn't get to or that you didn't have time to ask, you can submit those. And if you have questions that are related to your particular organization and how Perceptive Reflect can help your organization, you can contact Perceptive Software. There are contact information on our website, or if you're an existing customer, contact your account executive, and we'd be happy to set something up specifically for your organization and talk about further about your specific processes you're looking to improve. Other than that, I want to thank you again for everyone who attended and showed interest in our topic today. And with that, I believe that concludes our webinar. So everyone have a great day.